It's a Sunday in 1974. You're 7 years old, and before you've even opened your eyes, you know exactly what day it is, because the whole house smells of beef dripping and Yorkshire pudding rising in the oven. There's coal smoke from the fire your dad lit at 6. There's the sharp, clean bite of Carbolic soap by the kitchen sink, and underneath all of it, faint and familiar, your nan's lavender, and a thread of mothballs from the good coats hanging in the hall. You don't think about any of it. You don't have words for it. You just know in your bones that you're home. Here's the strange thing about smell. It's the only one of your senses wired straight into memory, with nothing in between. A photograph shows you the past from the outside. A smell drops you back inside it. One breath, and you're 7 again, in your socks on the cold lino, waiting for your dinner. So close your eyes, because the next half hour is going to take you somewhere you haven't properly stood in 50 years. Let me tell you why this works before we begin. When you see something or hear something, the signal takes the long way round. It gets sorted, labelled, filed, checked against everything you already know. But smell doesn't queue up like that. Smell goes straight in, through the back door, into the oldest part of your brain, the part that handles memory and feeling before you've had a chance to think. That's why a smell can ambush you. You can be a grown adult, 50-odd years old, standing in a car park, and one waft of something will put a lump in your throat before you even understand why. You've felt it. A stranger walks past wearing a soap your grandmother used, and for half a second, she's alive again. Somebody lights a coal fire 3 gardens away on a cold afternoon, and suddenly you're a child. You can't summon it on purpose. You can't search for it. It just arrives, uninvited, and it's always stronger than you expect. So that's the game for the next little while. I'm going to name them. The smells of Yorkshire in the 1970s, one by one, room by room, street by street, and somewhere in here is yours. You'll know the moment I get it right, because you won't just remember it. You'll smell it. And when I do land on yours, I want you to do something for me. Hold on to it, because by the end of this, I'm going to tell you where it went. Let's start where every Yorkshire childhood started, at home. Movement 1, the home, the first thing, always was the fire. In a 1970s Yorkshire house, the day began with coal. Your dad, or your mam, down first in the cold, raking out yesterday's ash, the gritty grey rattle of it going into the bucket. Then the fire lighters, that waxy paraffin smell on the fingers, and the kindling, and the first proper lungful of coal smoke as it caught. By the time you came down, the front room had a warmth to it that no radiator has ever managed since. Coal smoke isn't a clean smell. It's thick and sooty and a bit sulphurous, and it got into everything. The curtains, your school jumper, your hair. You carried your house around with you all day without knowing it. And on a frosty morning, the whole street smelled of it. 100 chimneys all going at once, a low blue haze hanging over the rooftops. You thought that was just what winter smelled like. You thought everywhere smelled like that. Then there was the coal itself, before it ever reached the fire. The coal man heaving sacks on his back, black-faced, tipping them down the chute into the cellar or the bunker, and that dusty, mineral, underground smell rolling up out of the dark. The coal scuttle by the hearth, the little shovel, your hands black if you touched any of it, and the telling off if you did. Now walk through to the kitchen, because Sunday had its own smell entirely. Beef dripping. There is nothing like it, and there's barely anywhere left that does it. A joint going in the oven mid-morning, the fat rendering down, and that deep, savoury, almost beefy sweet smell filling the house for hours. The Yorkshire puddings made in the dripping itself, the batter screaming as it hit the hot fat, roast potatoes done the same way. By 1 o'clock the windows were running with condensation, and you could have eaten the air. And the leftover dripping went into a bowl in the pantry, set hard and pale with a brown jelly at the bottom, and that was your tea, dripping on bread, a bit of salt, and if you were lucky some of the brown jelly scraped out from underneath. People half your age have never tasted it. They don't know what they're missing. And then there was Monday, wash day. Every Yorkshire mam knew Monday was wash day, and Monday had a smell all of its own. The copper or the twin tub going, the whole kitchen filling with steam, the hot wet smell of boiled cotton. Soap powder, that clean, slightly chemical perfume of Tide or Daz or Omo, the box with the picture on it, the blue bag for the whites. Robin starch, stiff and faintly sweet. And then the mangle, the water wrung out grey, and the washing hung on the wooden clothes horse. The maiden, steaming in, front of the fire when it rained, draped over every chair, the windows white with it. Damp washing drying indoors has a smell that anybody over 50 knows instantly. Slightly sour, slightly warm, completely comforting. It meant your mam had been at it all day. It meant clean sheets that night that smelled of soap and outside air. By that same kitchen sink sat the soap, not the soft scented stuff you get now. Carbolic, red hard, medicinal. That sharp, clean smell that meant your hands were properly clean whether they wanted to be or not. Coal tar soap, Wright's, dark amber. The smell of it almost like creosote, but somehow lovely. It stripped the dirt and the day off you. After a bath you smelled of it for hours, and so did the towel, and so did the whole bathroom. And in the corner, in the cold months, the paraffin heater. That blue flame smell, oily and sharp, the heater you weren't allowed to touch, carried carefully from room to room. The pink paraffin from the ironmongers. It's a smell that's almost entirely gone now, and the second you catch it again, at a car boot sale, an old shed, you're back in a freezing back bedroom in 1976, getting changed as fast as you can. But there was one house that smelled better than your own, your nan's. Every nan's house in Yorkshire smelled roughly the same, and it was the best smell in the world. Lavender, first from the polish, from the soap, from the little bags in the drawers. Furniture polish, that waxy beeswax smell, because the front room was kept for best and dusted within an inch of its life. Mothballs from the wardrobe, that sharp camphor hit when she opened it to find you a humbug. And always, always baking. Because your nan baked, every nan baked, and there was usually something cooling under a tea towel that you weren't supposed to touch yet. Walking into your nan's house was like walking into a hug you could smell. You didn't appreciate it then. You'd give anything for 10 seconds of it now. That was home. Now let's open the front door and go out. Movement 2, the street and the shops step outside. And the first place you came to was the corner shop. And the corner shop had a smell you can't get anywhere now, because no single shop sells all those things together anymore. Paraffin again, by the door where they kept it. Loose biscuits in tins with glass lids, broken ones cheaper in a bag. The bacon slicer going, that fatty, smoky, salty smell of a side of bacon being cut to order. Firelighters stacked by the counter, sweets in jars behind. Newspapers and that particular ink and paper smell of a fresh stack of them. Loose tea weighed out, cheese cut from a block with a wire. It all mingled together into one shop smell, part food, part fuel, part newsprint, and every kid in the street knew it, because you were sent there a dozen times a week with a list and a note and the exact money. And hanging over the whole shop and half the men in it was tobacco, pipe smoke, that sweet, warm, slightly rummy smell of pipe tobacco that doesn't seem to exist anymore. Old Holborn and Golden Virginia, the roll-ups, the tin opened and that rich brown smell coming out. Woodbines, Park Drive, the blue fug in the bus, in the pub, in the front room when the relatives came. You didn't think it was anything, it was just the smell of grown men. Half of Yorkshire smelled of pipe smoke and nobody blinked. But the king of the street, the smell that could stop a grown man in his tracks, was the chippy. Friday night. The chip shop. And here's the thing you have to understand. In 1970s Yorkshire, proper chips were fried in beef dripping, not oil, and that is a smell that simply doesn't exist in most chip shops anymore. Rich, deep, savoury, with the sharp tang of malt vinegar cutting through it, and the salt and the heat, the fish in batter. The scraps, the bits of crispy batter they'd give you free in a bag if you asked nicely. And it all came wrapped in newspaper, actual newspaper, and the heat of the chips brought up the smell of the warm newsprint, and you carried it home, held against your chest like treasure, eating the corner ones on the way because you couldn't wait. Open chip paper now, and it's never quite the same. But for a second, the dripping and the vinegar and the hot paper, there it is. And one more for the men and the boys. The Barbers. Warm lather from the shaving brush. That almondy soap smell. Brill cream, sweet and greasy, slicked onto every head. A bit of cigarette smoke. The hot towel smell. The talcum brushed onto your neck at the end. You came out smelling like your dad, which when you were 7 was the whole point. And don't forget the cobbler, tucked in his little shop with the machine going in the back. Leather and glue and shoe polish, that thick waxy cherry blossom smell, the rubber of new soles, the dust of the buffing wheel. You took your school shoes in to be mended because you didn't just throw them out in those days, and you waited on a wooden chair breathing in leather while he tapped the heels on. There was the hardware shop too. The ironmongers, paraffin and creosote and turpentine and linseed oil, sacks of nails, that sharp, oily smell of a place that sold everything a man needed to fix a house. And the greengrocer, the earthy smell of potatoes with the dirt still on, spuds weighed out by the pound, the green smell of cabbages and the sweetness of a box of oranges at Christmas. Every shop on that street had its own smell, and you could have walked the whole row blindfolded and known exactly where you were by your nose alone. That was the street. But Yorkshire wasn't only homes and shops. Yorkshire worked, and the work had a smell too, bigger than any kitchen, hanging over whole towns and whole valleys. That's where we're going next. Movement 3, where Yorkshire worked. This is the part that, if you grew up in the right place, is going to get you. Because in the 1970s, the West Riding still smelled of wool. The mills were still going, not as many as before, but going. And the smell of a working woolen mill is something whole generations of Yorkshire people grew up inside and will never forget. Wet wool, first of all, that slightly animal, slightly damp smell of fleece. Lanolin, the natural grease in the wool, heavy and waxy and getting into your skin. Machine oil, hot from the looms and the spinning frames. The dye houses, sharp and chemical. Steam, and over the whole town on a still day, that thick lanolin and oil smell that meant the mill was running and the wage was coming in. If your mam worked in the mill, she came home smelling of it, and you knew that smell better than you knew her perfume. The cloth, the oil, the wool. Towns like Bradford, Halifax, Huddersfield, Dewsbury, the whole West Riding breathed it. There were chimneys on every skyline and the air had a weight to it. It wasn't a clean smell, but it was the smell of a town that had work. And when it went, it didn't just take the smell, it took the work with it. And then there was the other great Yorkshire industry, underground. The pit, if you grew up in a mining village, and so many did, across the South Yorkshire and West Yorkshire coalfields, then the smell of coal wasn't just the fire in the grate. It was the pit itself, the headgear winding, the coal dust that got everywhere, on the washing on the line, in the cracks of the pavement. And it was your dad. The smell of your dad coming home off shift before he'd had his bath. Coal dust and sweat and the deep underground smell of the seam, sometimes in the bath in front of the fire, your mam scrubbing his back. That smell meant your dad was home safe, which when your dad went down a pit every day was not a small thing. There are men your age now who would give anything to smell that one more time, because it would mean their father was through the door. And there was a third smell that drifted over the towns, and this one nobody minded at all. The brewery, molten hops, that thick, sweet, bready, almost cereal smell of brewing rolling out over the streets on certain days. Tetley's in Leeds, the breweries in Tadcaster, Sam Smith's, John Smith's, a whole town that smelled of beer being made. You could be a child who'd never touched a drop and still love that smell, warm and malty, and somehow homely, drifting in on the wind. People would sniff the air and say which way the wind was blowing by whether they could smell the brewery. It was part of the furniture. It was part of the place. Wool, coal, beer, the 3 great smells of working Yorkshire. Hold on to those. We'll come back to them, and it won't be easy when we do. But let's lift the mood, because there was one set of smells that belonged entirely to being a child, and it's the best part of all of this. Movement 4. The smell of being a kid, right, the sweet shop. Eyes closed. The bell over the door, and then that wall of sugar. Sherbet lemons, aniseed balls, pear drops, rhubarb and custard, cola cubes, mint perials. Sherbet itself, that fizzy, sharp, slightly chemical sweetness, in a dip-dab or a flying saucer, or shoveled loose by the quarter. Cali, that's what we called sherbet powder up here, eaten off your finger till your tongue was raw. Licorice, black and strong, Spanish, the licorice root you actually chewed. And the smell of it all together, sugar and aniseed and the brown paper bag, weighed out on the scales by the woman who knew exactly how many you got for your tuppence. A quarter of pear drops handed over in a twist of paper. You can smell it right now, can't you? You're at the counter on tiptoe, money sweaty in your fist. Then school. School had its own smells, and not all of them good. The free milk first. Those little third-of-a-pint bottles, and in summer they'd been sat by the radiator and gone warm, and that warm milk smell is burned into the memory of every kid who went to school before they stopped the milk. The foil top. The straw. Semolina pudding and that skin on the custard. The dinner hall. Mince and boiled cabbage and gravy. Floor polish, that institutional, waxy red floor smell. The PE cupboard. Rubber plimsolls and the leather of the gym horse and old sweat and dust. The poster paint and the powder paint mixed with water. The wax crayons, the plasticine warm from your hands. Close your eyes in a primary school today, and it still smells a bit like that, and it'll put you straight back behind a little wooden desk with a hole for an inkwell. And then the best night of the Yorkshire year, smell-wise. Bonfire night, because Yorkshire does bonfire night properly, and bonfire night is nothing but smells. Gunpowder, sharp and sulphurous, the spent sparklers, the smoke drifting across the gardens, the bonfire itself, wood smoke and old furniture, and a bit of everything. And the food, this is the Yorkshire bit, parkin. That dark, sticky, treacly ginger cake that's better a few days old, the smell of it warm, treacle and ginger and oatmeal, black peas or mushy peas in a cup with vinegar, steaming in the cold, toffee, bonfire toffee, the dark slab you smashed with a little hammer, roast chestnuts off a brazier, jacket potatoes done in the embers, black on the outside, standing in a freezing garden in your wellies with a sparkler, the whole night a perfume of smoke and treacle and ginger and gunpowder. There is no smell in the world more like being a Yorkshire child than that one. And one last childhood smell, for the boys especially, though not only, Airfix glue. That sharp, dizzy, solvent smell, building a Spitfire on the kitchen table, getting it on your fingers. Brand new plastic toys at Christmas, the smell coming out of the box. A new Action Man, the chemical newness of it. You associated that smell with the best mornings of the year, and to this day a certain plastic smell will put a Christmas tree back in the corner of your eye. That was childhood, that was joy. Now, let's go a bit further out, beyond the streets, to where Yorkshire opened up. Movement 5, beyond the town, because Yorkshire isn't only mills and pits and terraced streets. Get out of the town, up into the Dales or out to the coast, and there was a whole other set of smells waiting, up in the Dales first. Get out of the bus, and the first thing that hit you was the country itself. Silage and muck. Yes, manure, the proper farmyard smell. Sharp and earthy that townies wrinkled their noses at, and country folk barely noticed. Cut hay drying in the long fields, that sweet, grassy, sun-warmed smell that is summer itself. Wet grass after rain. Sheep, the lanolin again, the same wool smell as the mill, but on the hoof, on the hills. Cow byres, warm and animal. And the stone, there's a smell to wet limestone and millstone grit, a cold mineral smell. The dry stone walls after a shower. Rain on a Dales afternoon, the whole valley smelling green and wet and clean. You'd come back from a day up there, and your coat smelled of outdoors for the rest of the week, and then the other direction. The coast, Whitby, Scarborough, Bridlington, Filey. The sea first, that big salty iodine seaweed smell that you could smell before you could even see the water, that made you wind the window down and shout that you could smell the sea. Then the harbour, fishing boats, nets, the catch. And in Whitby especially, the kippers, the smokehouses, oak smoke and oily fish, that rich smoked smell hanging over the streets, a smell that's been there for 100 years and more. Then the front, candy floss, that spun sugar smell, sweet and warm. Fish and chips again, but seaside ones, eaten on the wall, fighting off the gulls. Donkeys on the beach, the warm animal smell of them. Rock, that minty sugar smell of a stick of seaside rock, with the town's name through the middle. The arcades, hot and electric, and a bit of cigarette smoke. A day at the Yorkshire seaside was a whole symphony of smells, and you went home sunburnt and sandy and smelling of salt and vinegar and candy floss, asleep on the back seat before you'd left the town. And one more, because Yorkshire has a secret. The Rhubarb Triangle, that patch between Leeds, Wakefield and Morley where they grow the forced rhubarb in the dark sheds. And pickling season, late summer, every back kitchen at it. The sharp, eye-watering smell of malt vinegar boiling, onions being pickled, piccalilli with its mustard tang, beetroot, red cabbage, jars and jars of it lined up for winter. A Yorkshire pantry in autumn smelled of vinegar and spice, and it meant somebody's mam had been busy, and it meant you'd be eating well when it turned cold. That's it. That's the full sweep of it. Home, street, work, childhood, and the world beyond the town. Every one of those smells was real and ordinary and everywhere, and nobody thought twice about a single one of them. Now go and find them today. You can't. The turn, that's the thing nobody tells you. You don't just lose your childhood. You lose the smell of it, and you lose it so quietly that you never notice it going until it's already gone. Go and stand in the middle of a Yorkshire town today and breathe in. It smells of nothing much. Traffic, maybe. Coffee from a chain. And that's not your imagination, and it's not just that you've grown up. The smells genuinely left, one by one, and most of them are never coming back. Let me tell you where they went, because every smell that vanished took a whole world out with it. The coal smoke went first, and it went by law. The Clean Air Acts and the smokeless zones did away with the open coal fire, and they were right too. The smogs were killing people. But it means a whole generation has never smelled 100 chimneys going on a frosty morning, and never will. The fires went out, the streets went odourless. The thing that smelled like winter to you is now, to a child, just a thing their grandparents talk about. The paraffin heater went, replaced by central heating, clean and smellless and far better, and somehow nothing. The carbolic and the coal tar soap mostly went, replaced by soft-scented things that don't strip the day off you the same way. The dripping went. The chip shops switched to vegetable oil, healthier, lighter, and that deep beef drink smell that meant Friday night went with it. You can still find it if you hunt. You shouldn't have to hunt. And the big ones, the mills closed, the whole West Riding wool trade, that lanolin and oil smell that hung over Bradford and Halifax and Huddersfield. It's gone, because the mills are gone. The ones still standing are flats now, or offices, or car parks, or rubble. The town that smelled of wool doesn't smell of anything. The pits closed, all of them, the whole coal field, and the villages that were built around them lost the headgear, lost the work, and lost the smell of a father coming home off shift. The breweries, many of them, gone or moved or shrunk, and the towns that used to smell of malt and hops on a brewing day mostly don't anymore. The corner shop with paraffin by the door and bacon on the slicer and loose biscuits in tins, that's a supermarket now. And a supermarket smells of almost nothing at all because everything's wrapped in plastic, sealed, deodorized, identical. That's the real change, when you think about it. We wrapped the world in plastic and we took the smell off it. The pipe smoke went, indoors at least, and good riddance to the harm of it. But the warm, sweet smell of it went too, and with it a whole picture of what a grown man smelled like. Every single one of those smells was attached to something. A trade, a street, a way of living, a person. And when the thing went, the smell went, and now there's no way back to it. Because you can keep a photograph, you can keep a record, you can keep a recipe, but you cannot keep a smell. It's the one part of the past you genuinely cannot save. When it's gone, it's gone. Except it isn't quite. And this is the strange mercy in all of it. Because of all your memories, the ones tied to smell are the last to leave you. Doctors who work with people losing their memory will tell you this, that a person can forget names, forget faces, forget the year, forget almost everything, and a smell from their childhood will still reach them when nothing else can. The kitchen they grew up in, their mother's baking, the soap their father used. It's wired in so deep so early in that old part of the brain that it survives when the rest has gone. The first memories you ever made through your nose before you could even talk, are the very last ones to fade. So no, you can't go back. The fires are out, the mills are flats, the pit is a country park with a sign. The chippy uses oil now, and the corner shop is a Tesco Express. And your nan's house belongs to strangers who've never smelled the lavender, and the polish and the baking under the tea towel. But for 10 seconds, when a stranger walks past in the right soap, When someone 3 gardens away lights a coal fire on a cold afternoon. When you catch dripping or vinegar or hot newspaper somewhere unexpected. For 10 seconds you're back. And it's not a picture of the past, it's the past itself, the actual feeling of it, the cold lino and the socks and the dinner in the oven. You're 7 again. You're home. And here's the part that I think matters most. Nobody ever stopped to enjoy these smells at the time. That's the heartbreak of it. Nobody stood in the kitchen on a Sunday and thought, I should remember this, I should breathe this in properly, because one day it'll be gone and I'll want it back. You just lived in it. The dripping and the coal smoke and the wet washing and the lavender were simply the air you moved through, free and endless and always there. You'd have laughed if someone had told you they were precious. And that's exactly why they hit so hard now. Because you never said goodbye to a single one of them. They left without you noticing, and by the time you turned round to look, they were already years gone. And that's really what all these smells were. They were the people. The father who came home off shift smelling of the seam, who you'd give anything to smell one more time. The mother at the twin tub on a Monday with the windows white with steam, who turned a freezing house into somewhere warm. The nan whose house smelled of lavender and baking, and who always had something cooling that you weren't allowed to touch yet. The man behind the chip shop counter on a Friday night. The woman in the sweet shop who knew how many pear drops you got for your tuppence. They're most of them gone now. Those people, the same as the smells, are gone. But you can still smell them, just for a second, when the wind's right. And that's not nothing. That's very far from nothing. That's what your nose kept for you when everything else let go. So tell me in the comments, which one took you straight back? Which smell did I land on that put a lump in your throat? I'll bet I know which one it was, but I want to hear it from you. Was it the dripping, the coal fire, your nan's house, the mill, or the pit, or the brewery on the wind? And if you knew someone who grew up in a house that smelled exactly like that, a brother, a sister, an old friend from the street, share this with them. Give them their 10 seconds back. And subscribe to the channel so these smells don't disappear completely, because nobody's writing them down. Nobody's keeping them. They only live as long as we remember them, so let's remember them together while we still can. I'll see you next time.